You're now listening to the Adiel Gorel Show. Each episode I'll bring you the latest news from my discussions with top health and wellness experts so that you can bring yourself into better health. Today on the Adiel Gorel Show.
Well, that's where the expertise comes in, because unfortunately, the government is not doing a great job in regulating this. And that's why, my 56 years of experience, I only choose beneficial bacteria that have been in the literature for at least 100 years and have actually evolved with Homo sapiens.
Hi everyone, it's a joy to be here with you again today on this beautiful day. And it's very exciting. Of course, the microbiome has been a huge subject everywhere. And today we have the privilege of having a guest on our show who is known as the mother of probiotics. I mean, my God, I'm excited about that. Our guest is Natasha Trenev. Natasha, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here with you.
So, Natasha, you have an extensive background and history, and I'm not going to read it now. So, why don't you tell us your story, which is not only fascinating, but it's clearly showing that you have a deep passion for the subject.
Yeah. I came to this country as a child. My parents were immigrants from the former Yugoslavia. My father was the official court supplier of food to the King of Yugoslavia. And my grandfathers connected to my father's family have been in the fermented food business for about 750 years. So it's not like something I thought of that I would join. In fact, I wasn't sure I was joining my family business. I had another career in mind. But, I became to love the business and the stories I heard from the people. We were the first one to introduce a natural-style Bulgarian yogurt to North America in the early 1960s while I was still a student at Hollywood High School, and then I went on to UCLA. And we were the first ones to introduce a liquid acidophilus, which I used to train many notables like Adele Davis and Bernard Jensen of the few. And so I had to become proficient. And so I decided to get materials from the Academy of Sciences in the former capital called Leningrad. Now it's again called St. Petersburg. And, material from Bulgarian textbooks, Yugoslav textbooks, because there was not that much in American literature then. And so I started translating this and I thought, oh my God, this is really phenomenal. These bacteria have improved the health and well-being of all these civilizations who ingested them on a daily basis. Why is it that we here in America don't know anything about it? And basically that started my journey.
That is fascinating. And I'll ask you a simple-minded question. Obviously, you supplied and you created, and your family did, the yogurt that was actually prized by the royal family in Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
Is that yogurt still being produced today?
No, unfortunately, it's not. I sort of decided in the late 1970s that I wanted to become more technical and produce more technical products. And my father was more interested in doing commercial expansion. And so, unfortunately, the yogurt did not survive. But while it was there, it was being shipped to the English Royal Palace once or twice a month. And they would buy exclusively the yogurt that we packed in glass jars. And so I know that the tradition continued. And so I'm happy that I went into the field that I named probiotic. I didn't think of the word, but I named the field probiotic. Because I felt that these microbes, if they're handled properly, if they're grown properly, if they're protected, they can serve humanity in many regards, because actually the gut is the cause of all health progress and all disease.
Well, we hear a lot these days about our second brain, so to speak, that exists in our gut. we hear about the microbiome and its relation to our immune system, our brain, our mental clarity, health. Can you talk a little bit about that? A little more
Sure.
about that.
I was one of the first persons to actually talk about the brain-gut connection, and was roundly criticized because it said, oh, nothing can pass the blood-brain barrier. And I said, bacteria can. So thankfully, I was proven right. But, the second brain is really found in the gut. It's called the enteric nervous system. And that nervous system is directly connected to the first brain via something we call the vagus nerve. And that nerve delivers neurotransmitters from the gut to the first brain. And very importantly, up to 80 to 90% of the serotonin is produced in the gut and delivered to the first brain. About 50% of the dopamine is manufactured there and delivered to the first brain. It's a precursor for the production of GABA and tryptophan and on and on. So the body is well equipped to adequately take care of itself. The problem is when we interfere and don't understand what cuts the process and how we can improve it to go back to normal and allow the body really to heal itself.
The vagus nerve itself has been much more in the media and the consciousness of the public at large recently, so much so that there are many devices or procedures to stimulate the vagus nerve with the general idea that it brings us into a state of peace, a state of relaxation. Can you talk a little bit about the vagus nerve?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of doing anything artificial to the body. I think the body is brilliant. And I think when you learn to meditate and you take care of the food, you take the proper probiotics supplementation, you don't need to go. I think that's helpful for people who have chronic conditions that they're not able to heal by themselves. But definitely the vagus nerve, and the reason it's responsible for this is because, remember, it transmits these compounds from the gut to the first brain. So by stimulating the vagus nerve, it does a better job of transmitting, but it doesn't actually produce the compounds.
That makes perfect sense. So clearly the immune system has been on the minds of pretty much, I don't want to say, everyone, but a huge amount of people worldwide with COVID. The immune system really, there was a big light shining on it. Can you talk about the relationship between the microbiome, as we call it, and the immune system?
Well, absolutely. Approximately 80% of your immune cells line the GI lining of the 27 feet of the GI tract. And so that's where the 100 trillion microbes live. And they not only fight for attachment sites, which I call lovingly parking spaces on the intestinal wall, they also communicate with immune cells. Now, the bacteria that I have chosen, I've been in the literature for 100 years and only had positive communication with the immune cells, and they can actually stimulate the immune system to react to what these bacteria perceive to be an intruder and help it to identify it and use it, because when it doesn't identify the intruder, it can lead to food allergies or autoimmune disease. So that communication is very important, and it's done by photon light emission or by chemical means. And, the immune system stimulation appropriately is very important, especially in this day and age.
This is we talk loosely about the good bacteria, the friendly bacteria, and the bad bacteria, which can cause harm. How do people distinguish between all of the kind of bacterium that exists to first classify it into the general two camps, good bacteria and bad bacteria?
Well, that's where the expertise comes in, because unfortunately, The government is not doing a great job in regulating this. And that's why, my 56 years of experience, I only choose beneficial bacteria that have been in the literature for at least 100 years and have actually evolved with Homo sapiens. And I make sure that all of them are compatible, because many of these formulations use, 6, 8, 10 strains without knowing if they're compatible. And when these bacteria are allowed to touch each other in the capsule, they're only in a state of arrested growth. They start eliminating each other or becoming hostile. And many of these people have now chosen to take care of symptoms, so they give you what they so-called beneficial yeast, which I disagree about vehemently, or they give you soil organisms, which is a dangerous proposition, because soil organisms are very prominent shape shifters, and they can change their shape. And when they change their shape, you have no idea what they're going to do inside your GI tract. That's why your mother told you, wash your vegetables and fruit, not just from the dirt, but from the bacteria that are found in the soil.
What about the connection between the microbiome, the health of the microbiome, and our state of mind? People talk about mental fog or mental clarity. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. And it's due to, first of all, our perception of reality, or the ingestion of highly processed sugar or carbohydrate-laden foods. So when you do this, you are actually selecting microbes in your gut that are not too friendly for you and that will cause the problem and will cause the interference, because sugar is a direct food for yeast and for other unfriendly bacteria. And they will produce chemicals that will, then the wrong chemicals will be sent up via your vagus nerve to your first brain, and that's what causes this brain fog. And so it's not just, taking the right probiotic supplementation. It's one, being on a low carbohydrate diet and not eating processed foods. And by the way, just because you're shopping in a health food store doesn't mean you're not getting processed foods. They have processed foods there. They're not nearly as bad for you as the foods found in the supermarket. But, people need to eat what I call basic foods. And to give you a perfect example, there's no such thing as almond milk. That's a processed food. There's no such thing as oat milk. It's a processed food. There's no such thing as coconut milk. It's a processed food. So I think we have to go back to basics and not have highly processed foods, get good oils, sit down when we're eating, make sure we chew our food, and make sure that we are sauteing our vegetables, because in this day and age, most people cannot handle raw foods.
It's interesting. What made it so in this day and age we can't handle raw foods?
Because we've destroyed our microbiome. When only 10% of the mothers are able to transfer the right bacteria, which is called Bifidobacteria infantis, to their child, even though it's born vaginally and breastfed, that's a huge problem, because that means that this child does not have a predisposition to healthy immune function and the ability to digest food. And also the excessive use of antibiotics have destroyed the flora. And I find that many young people do get bloated because they eat raw foods, one, that their body can't handle because they've destroyed their flora, and number two, because they never chew it enough to help start digestion in the mouth, because most people are unaware that your digestion starts in the mouth.
I think that makes perfect sense, because in this day and age, we have the phone sitting there. Maybe the TV is blaring in the background. Maybe we read the news while we eat, and maybe we stand up. And we may not even be sitting down. I think the malady, if you call it, of way too fast, to just inhale the food rather than chew the food slowly, is more and more prevalent, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think the fact that we've gotten away from sitting down and eating our foods with family and friends, to stop looking at our electronic devices. And the reason there was a social aspect to eating is because it should be an enjoyable process that you take your time to chew your food and de-stress your body so it's able to produce sufficient gastric juices in the stomach and other enzymes necessary to efficiently digest your food.
I would even maybe venture a guess, and I want to hear what you think about that, that when we eat, it's not only that we chew, of course, that's the main thing, but it's we look at the food, we smell the food, we sort of enjoy all the senses. And if we are looking at our phone, we don't do that.
You're precisely right. We trash our bodies. Not only trash our bodies with how we shovel food in. I've seen a lot of these young men that sit by their video games. They don't even get up. They're wolfing down microwave food. I have a huge issue with microwaving your food or anything. I think it's terrible. I think it takes away the nutrients. Anything that heats the food from the inside out is detrimental. And so, unfortunately, I didn't create the problem. But that's why I stayed to work, because I realized there's several generations of young people that have tremendous problem with their digestive issues of digesting and absorbing food. It's become epidemic, and now we're seeing even colon cancer in young people where we've never seen it before. We have an explosion of pancreatic cancer, and this all comes from bad diet, bad food, foods that are adulterated and introduce microbes into our body that can cause the malfunction or the reproduction of what I call cheap proteins, because your body's reproducing itself every minute of the day. You lose about 10 million cells every minute, and those cells have to be rebuilt. So if you're not getting the proper food, not digesting it right, you can in no wise make healthy protein. You're probably going to make cheap protein, and that's one of the reasons that's leading to these chronic diseases we have in this country.
That is absolutely fascinating. I'm jumping back into something that you mentioned before. Let's say that someone had no choice but to take a course of antibiotics. Let's say some, acute, injury was there, and there was real fear of infection, and they took a course of antibiotics. I assume to try and mitigate it at least, you want to counter it with probiotics, right?
Absolutely. Look, I'm not against antibiotics. I'm just against the casual or overuse of antibiotics because that's destroyed our microbiome. But yes, I'm the first one who has stated that 2 hours after each intake of a antibiotic, you should be taking a probiotic to minimize the damage that's going to be done to your microbiome. And then after you finish your course, reminder, it's very important you finish your course of antibiotics. And then you double your intake of probiotics for at least a couple of weeks to make sure that there are no empty spaces on that intestinal wall that an unfriendly may want to occupy. Because a bacteria a lot smarter than we are, and usually there is something of a 10% survival rate of any organism that you're trying to eliminate. And you want to keep that 10% in check so it never overgrows and becomes dangerous.
You mentioned before that sugar is a favorite food of the hostile bacteria and many other hostile organisms and processes in our body. But don't the good bacteria like sugar as well?
No, actually, the organisms I use, the Lactobacillus bulgaricus and the acidophilus, don't actually like sugar. And it's very interesting. And even the bifidobacteria I use don't like cane sugar. They like honey, but they don't like cane sugar. It's very fascinating because all these artificial sweeteners are stimulating the growth of these bad bacteria and yeast because they're tricking the body. They're giving a chemical. And some of these chemicals is sugar, but it's made indigestible so that your body cannot digest it for itself, and it becomes direct food for the bacteria. And as a matter of fact, there have been numerous articles published about one such, artificial sweetener that causes tremendous issues with the composition of the microbiota and the microbiome.
This is very fascinating about the honey, because for people who look at those things superficially, honey is sugar and leave me alone, it's just another sugar. But high quality honey, let's say honey that, there's Manuka honey and whatever those very high grade honeys, don't seem to have the same thing. In fact, many of those honeys are purported to have, antimicrobial and antiviral properties. Can you?
Yes, it does. Honey is a natural food, and it has a proportion of sugars that the body can handle. And that honey also has medicinal properties, as you so well mentioned. And not that I'm an expert on honey, but I've been told that if you want to help with your allergies, along with the good bacteria, locally grown honey. Why? Because those local bees have already dealt with the allergens that are in the environment.
That is absolutely fascinating, that the local honey will have handled those allergies that you suffer from when you go outside. So if some of the best honeys, at least on paper, come from New Zealand, those Manuka honeys that are super high grade, and that may not be as beneficial to somebody living, say, in California as a good.
Yeah, but Manuka honey has other properties. There's other properties, that Manuka honey possesses. But I'm saying if you're strictly dealing with allergies, the local honey is the best, as long as it's not heated and abused. It's raw local honey, because it's logical. The local bees have had to deal with those allergens. So it's not a substitute for a high-quality honey of Manuka. It's better equipped to handle the local allergies.
What do we say to some of the purists who say, look, I completely agree that people should feed themselves the highest quality food that they can find. If somebody eats a very good, wholesome, local, organic, non-GMO diet, lots of fruits and veggies that lightly sauteed, the raw foods, as you said, would they still need to supplement with probiotics?
Yes, because the environment has changed forever. The local environment has changed, and that's why we have the chronic disease, because whatever we've done environmentally is not supporting the microbiome. This was, true 50 or 60 years ago. It's no longer true based on the number of chronic illnesses we have now. I think I mentioned this before in another interview, but about $4.3 trillion are spent on healthcare in this nation, and 80% of it is spent on chronic disease. That disease didn't come around slowly. It came about because, we completely ignored what was going on in our microbiome. So eating, healthy foods is one part of the formula. In fact, I have what I call the tripod of health. The tripod of health in today's day and age is the right diet, low in sugar and carbs, a specific precision probiotic supplementation, and regular exercise. And what I mean by exercise, I'm not encouraging anybody to go into a marathon run. I'm talking about walking, getting into the fresh air, doing, a non-intense exercise, because even intense exercise can be damaging to the body.
That makes a lot of sense. They say that the skin is a reflection of our health, and it's very visible. what would the effect of good microbiome hygiene be on our skin?
Well, remember, the skin is the largest organ we have, and it's the secondary exit for toxins that the body can eliminate in the normal way. So we give different names to these rashes, psoriasis, acne, but it's actually just different locations in the GI tract that are being affected, and the body cannot excrete those toxins, so it excretes it through the skin. I always tell everybody, I can tell if you've been on the precision probiotic because the tone of your skin will change. It will become more rosy, more pink. Doesn't matter what your skin color is. It will not look sort of grayish and, unhealthy. And second of all, if you want to talk about proper aging, I'm not ashamed to say I'm 75 and I think my skin is in really good condition. I've never injected anything into my skin. I've had no surgeries. I've done some, face masks, but my diet and my lifestyle is reflected in the health of my skin.
That makes perfect sense. And again, we talk about the aging, and there's a huge segment of dollars now going to anti-aging. And I assume that probably one of the most directed moves and effective moves we can do for that is indeed treat our microbiome right. Is that right?
That is correct. One of the earliest organisms studied for anti-aging was one of the organisms found in starter cultures for yogurt. It's called Lactobacillus bulgaricus. And even in the 1930s, Dr. Ilya Mechnikov, who was a fellow at the Pasteur Institute, studied the long-lived people of Bulgaria. That's why it's called Lactobacillus bulgaricus. And he wrote a book called The Prolongation of Life. And his theory was that if you're able to eliminate toxins from your body will not decay, get sick, and age rapidly.
Stay tuned for part 2 of this interview. Thank you for joining us today. I know you love what's coming next in part 2. Be sure to click the subscribe button for more videos.